What is you doing? You gotta get ready for the show. You sitting up here doing work. What is this?
I'm making money, but I'm trying to get some. Hey.
Okay, well get some in the studio so we can go ahead and get ready for the show.
Want some? I'm just asking.
I'll take some. Since
some.
you're asking, you want me to get some. Ooh, and this is creamy too. You know what? This is nice.
Silky.
My skin is soft, ain't it? Yeah, get some. Get some. Now get in the game room so we can get the studio so we can get the show going.
Okay,
this is soft though. Hey, get some. Hey man, hey, come on man, bro. We gotta go ahead and get in the studio, bro.
Yo, check it out though. I gotta make this shot for you so you can get your head right.
Man, if we don't have time to make the shot, we gotta go ahead and do it. We gotta go. Listen, you got one already made for me so we can go ahead and get started?
Yeah, I got one right there.
I'm gonna test this one out for you.
That's that Captain America shot, you know what I'm saying? From Freedom of Signal 27.
Oh man, that is good. You are awesome, man. But listen, finish making the shot in the room so we can go ahead and get everything straight. Ooh, my body hot, bro. That was good. Chill. Man, we gotta get in the studio, man, and do the show, man. Why you sitting in here? You're not even halfway up. Man, give me the remote, bro. Cut this shit off using all my electricity. Got my Netflix on and everything. Cut this shit off. Man, get up. Hurry up, bro. I know you messed up, but you can be unmessed up. Damn, bro. You ain't got nothing to say. Shit. Where David at? Oh.
That's that dedication. 2022, I'm on their neck like a tattoo. Hit them with that King Low. What you wanna do?
Well, listen, man, we gotta get ready for the show, and you using the equipment to rap songs, man. Let's get the thing going.
We are not the same, cause we are not the same.
Bro.
Too much traffic, I built my own lane.
Listen, so you just gonna respond to me when your rap you know what?
Raul is my spirit. You gonna know my name.
Listen, just get ready for the show, man.
All right.
Now, where's Claudine at? Everybody got... Why are you coming down the steps, Claudine?
I'm coming. You know I can't rock out with my crotch out, man. I had to get my clothes on.
Well, I'm glad you put some clothes on so nobody see that crotch now behind that guitar.
Man,
we gotta get ready to get in the guitar, man. Come on, man. Y'all gotta get ready for the show. Ain't nobody ready for the show, man. We gotta get... Oh. Come on, man. Everybody, man. Chip don't want to get up and Ed making stuff.
She coming. Are we gonna have a orgasm on the show?
Ain't nobody making
like being half ass without no ass cheek.
I wanna see that magic.
Now listen, man, everybody that said what they do, ain't nobody said what I do. But listen, I am the last Leroy, and we are Jacksonville's #1 live comedy podcast. We are Signal 27.
The
best live stream in the city. The Signal 27 Show.
What's going on, y'all? It's the Signal 27 Show. I want to thank everybody for tuning in this week. This week is an impromptu show because last week we had a show that was speaking in reference to comedy on cruise lines. So before we even get started, I want to thank you all for tuning in. Please do us a favor. It's free to do. Please like, comment, and share the video. It's free to do. You can also go to the webpage if you want to listen to our previous podcast from before. Last week's episode was in reference to doing comedy on board cruise lines. And then we might have had some information that might have not been completely correct. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce one of the best comedians here in the city of Jacksonville. He's doing his thing. He's one of the ones that's on the cruise lines that's right now. He can give us some insight as to what's going on. Let's give it up for the one and only A-Train, ladies and gentlemen. Let me go ahead and bring him in. What's going on, brother?
What's going on, my brother?
Oh, nothing. Just fine, man. Just chilling. I want to let everybody know that if you do want to listen and watch, you can also watch us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube. Instagram is going to be re-uploaded later because Instagram is giving me some issues. So we're just going to rerun this episode again, probably within the next hour. But nonetheless, let me go ahead and get started. First and foremost, yes, you all want to do Vols one because you are the ones that's working. We kind of see you working and we want to kind of like mimic what you got going on. So let us know how long you've been doing comedy and how did you get in the position that you're in now?
First of all, man, I want to say thank you for having me on here, man. Shout out to your whole crew. But I've been doing comedy now for 10 years. And I've been doing cruise ships for 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh. Okay, well that's a good. So in reference to the cruise ship, I know you listened to some of the podcasts before. First and foremost, thank you for watching and listening, and then also being a brother that's reaching out and be like, well, listen, you might have got some things incorrect. Just to clarify, last week, if you did not watch the episode, there was another comic that was on a cruise ship. His name was Manny Acosta, and he gave us some insight as to how he ended up getting on a cruise ship. And that insight was that, okay, well, the cruise ships feel like if you don't have an agent, then you can't go directly to the cruise lines. And I was like, okay, well, I got to get an agent. Well, for me to get an agent, I started doing the research. Well, he gave me a couple of agencies and they required that you submit in scissor reels. So I was like, okay, well, let me find some of the things that I have together to go ahead and put together a scissor reel so that they'll know, okay, I am capable of providing what the cruise ships are requiring. So, but you gave me a call and you was like, well, there's some things that might have changed in that process. So give us some insight about how you end up getting on the cruise ships.
Yeah, just in reference to something that Kevin Hart said on the Breakfast Club. He said, it's 27 doors, in this comedy game, you know what I mean? And he was like, find one, you know what I mean? And I referenced that to say, when it comes to working on cruise ships, there are multiple avenues, where one can get in. And as far as the statement that, the brother made last week on the show that, the only way, or the other comedian shared with you while you was on the ship, saying that the only way to get out there, you have to have an agent. And I personally know situations where that is incomplete. You know what I'm saying? I ain't gonna say he's incorrect, but it's just incomplete. Because I know some comedians that's out there right now and they have no representation whatsoever. They operate independently as a comedian, and they deal directly with the cruise line for their dates and their bookings, and have been doing it for years. So I just wanted to put that out there to complete that little bit of information.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So how does one, okay, if an individual doesn't have access to the agencies, how does one for example, for myself, I don't have access to anybody. I've been doing comedy for maybe like 3 years less. I'm probably like 7-8 years in right now.
Right.
But I do have well more than enough material from doing that to be able to do the requirements of a cruise line. Most of the cruise lines, from my understanding, require that. Well, when I talked to the cruise director at Carnival, he said you have to have at least 5 sets. And within those 5 sets, 2 or 3 of them have to be PG related, children friendly. And then you have to have at least 2 or 3 that are R-rated for adults only. And I was like, okay, well, that's pretty much that. After doing comedy for 8-9 years right now, that's nothing right now. I can't, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
my idea is that, okay, well, now that I have that background and have the material built up, how does one such as myself with no representation, what is required for me to be able to go to the cruise lines and be able to say, listen, okay, well, listen, you can book me for this particular cruise. What are those particular steps?
You have, it depends on the cruise line itself.
Okay.
Every cruise line is different. Not the ship, but the cruise line. And I'm just saying that so that your listening audience will understand what I'm talking about. Each cruise line have their own method in their recruiting. Some cruise lines, they'll put out a casting call, so to speak, where you go and you audition, and they'll have a panel, you perform, and you may hear something back in a few weeks and you may not, you know what I mean? And then there are other situations, like I say, some of the people who do have representation, sometimes their representation will let them know, hey, we're looking for some new people. Do you know anybody?
Okay.
And then also some of the people who have that representation, will let us know, hey, don't send nobody my way until we're ready. And that's another, like behind the scenes that a lot of people out in the comedy world, they're not aware of. And they be hitting you up like, hey, man, how I get on the boat? And it's like, well, that person may not know or have been censored, so to speak, to only pull the trigger when the agency is ready to bring folks in, if that makes sense. And like I say, every cruise line, is different. And some of the pros and cons of being independent, just to go back to what I said earlier about some of the guys who have no representation and they're working on the cruise ships as we speak. It has been noted, or it appears that sometimes when you're independent with certain cruise lines, you may not get booked as often or as regularly as the people who have representation. And it's simply, from what I've seen, it's simply based on the flow of that particular cruise line. When they're moving and when they're assigning dates, they have a certain chain of command, of level of a method of communication that they prefer to deal with. And based on what's on their desk, they may not have time to go through the traditional route of communicating these available dates, and then also reach out to you as an independent comic to say, hey, here are these slots, let me know your avails or whatever. And because of that method, it appears that some of the comedians who have representation tend to get booked more often than those who don't have representation. And
Okay.
again, I didn't say it was absolute, but sometimes it just kind of seems that way.
Okay. Well, I mean, that makes sense because a lot of times if you're represented even at the like being on land here at the comedy clubs, if you have representation, you can see individuals with representation, they pretty much get booked. They got shows every weekend in different places. So that kind of makes sense that they will kind of focus on the ones who have the agencies that's backing them. But for those who don't, you were stating that it's kind of like, okay, well, we know you're funny, you're good. Do you know anybody else that is just as good as you? Is from what if
Right.
that's what I'm understanding, and then you can put in a good word. I know recently, and I'll bring his name up because he's a person I follow as well. James Young recently just got put on Mardi Gras, not Mardi, what is it? Mardi Gras cruise line, I think, Margaritaville, I think. I just saw his post.
He just did some dates on Princess, so I think he's with Norwegian too. So yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Oh, okay. And that's real cool to see that. Okay, well, when I look at the post, it was like, yeah, we were trying to get this brother on, and he decided to go ahead and get jumped on. And James Young is an outstanding comic. I'm talking
So
about
excited
he's
for that brother, man.
well deserved. I'm talking about as
Yeah.
far as him doing his TV show with Afro TV Network
Yeah.
and everything like that, and giving me a platform to be able to be on his show. I just want to give him props and a shout out for him being able to have that opportunity and that experience. But it's good to know that if you are a good comic and you are well-rounded comic, that other comics will see your gift and be willing to go ahead and pay you for it and put you on. So that's a good thing that I like to see. Now, as far as the podcast last week, they were speaking in reference to contracts and things like that. What was it about the contracts that maybe one of our, Ed, we'll go ahead and call him Fabler, may have got incorrect or didn't have all of the complete knowledge? He was saying that sometimes they'll have you on for an hour and then have you wait 30 minutes and then wait an hour again or do some things like that. So what was it about his statement that might have been incorrect that we can kind of clarify for the people?
Is that statement, made me question what cruise line was he referring to, because I don't know no cruise line out here that charged the comedian for towels in their room. And I don't know, maybe he was speaking loosely, trying to explain a point, but I was like, well, what cruise line you on? Because the narrative that he was explaining on how we as comedians have to make sure our rider and our contract, is airtight, because you get out here and these cruise lines might try to have you do more shows than what they told you, or, try to nickel and dime you for the necessities for, you as a performer or your room. And I'm, I don't claim to know everything. That's why I put it out as a question, like, hey, well, what cruise line is that? Because none of the, major cruise lines that, I've worked on and some of my other fellow comedians have worked on, like, that's not the case at all. It's a common, like, again, every cruise line is different. Some cruise lines, they have a standard amount of shows that you want to do within that week. Okay, whether you're doing a 7-day cruise, 5-day cruise, or a 4-day cruise, and sometimes a 3-day cruise. I even worked on cruise lines like Margaritaville. It was a 2-day cruise. And each cruise line, they have their standard amount, the standard number of shows. So you go in understanding that from the rip. And sometimes with the programming on that ship, let's say the acrobat team, somebody is ill or somebody got an injury, or the weather may be too choppy, so to prevent the acrobat team from performing, their show. So the entertainment director, they may reach out to the comedian and say, hey, we need to add a show to fill in this slot for entertainment. And they're asking you, are you willing to do it? Which means you have the liberty to say yes or no. And if you say yes, based on the number of shows that they just added on top of what you knew your normal agreement is, if it falls above, what you've established to perform, it's common knowledge. You don't have to fight tooth and nail or, I got to make sure my contract right. No, they know that once they exceed a certain number of shows, that they have to compensate you extra for those shows. And I mean, that's common knowledge with all, cruise lines. So, and comedy show, comedians. So, and also I want to point out the difference between, working on a cruise ship that is through the cruise line versus working a chartered show on the cruise line. Say, for example, because last week they were talking about the Tom Joyner morning show cruise that he does every year, the cruise that Tom Joyner does every year. Right. Well, that's not whatever ship he's on. That's not that cruise line's event. That is Tom Joyner booking this particular ship and cruise line to host, his event, which means the cruise line has absolutely nothing to do with that other than just they're the venue. And the people who paid money to come on that Tom Joyner cruise, yeah, they paid money to come see Frankie Beverly. They paid money to come see LL Cool J. They paid money to see Usher. And, they paid money to, get a chance to see and hang out with Tom Joyner. So to say that people go on these cruises and they neglect the cruise ship just so they could see the concert, that's what the cruise was about. So there's no shade to the people. They're doing what they paid to do. And when you are a comedian and you're working on a chartered cruise event like the Tom Joyner Morning Show, well, you know, that's like you getting booked anywhere else in the country, but not through the cruise line. So when you see a comedian work an event-based cruise, you know, and there's several out there. I don't want to call their name, but I just stick to Tom Joyner since that's who the guy mentioned. But there's several independent chartered cruises out there that when you see a comedian do that, I'm here to tell you that is a false representation of what it's like working on a cruise line. Because when you do, you know what I'm saying, you know, like I just did the Maxwell cruise in February. So Maxwell, the artist, he threw a cruise. He chartered a ship from the Norwegian cruise line. I think it was the Pearl. So he chartered the Pearl, sold the ship out. He had Music Soul Child, you know, a couple other artists, Lettucey, all of them. And I was the host on that show, on that cruise, and I had to perform two shows that week. That was one of the best cruises I've ever been on. It was electric. It was just the audience was concentrated, you know what I'm saying? Which means, you know, there's a certain vibe that you get and that you may be in the midst of that you really prefer. But when you work on a cruise line with directly through the cruise ship, you can't dictate what that audience is. So that's why I say if anybody has worked on a chartered cruise, you know, whether it's Tom Joyner, Maxwell, you know, Grown and Sexy, you know, a couple of other those charter situations out there, listen to me. And any comedian who worked on cruise ships, they will tell you, the comedian who performed on that ship, they need not to think, oh, this how it is right here. No, it's not. Because you can be on a ship, brother, and the audience is so diverse and people from everywhere. So some of the jokes and the that you use in your concentrated audience or your environment, like you do on land, you possibly can't do out on the water because the audience you standing before, they don't know nothing about what you're talking about unless you get real crafty in applying your material to the point where the masses can relate to it. So that's just one aspect to let you know that, yeah, working on a chartered cruise, like an independent cruise that somebody throw, you know, you can't call that comedian a cruise ship comedian because he has yet to get a taste of what the reality is. You know, there's some ships I work on, man. I'm the only black dude on the whole boat. You know, so it's like, you know, is there are age differences out there. There are cultural barriers that you have to cross. You know, so many different like ethnicities. Like it's just different. You know, but when you do that as a comedian on the ship, you know, you don't have to worry about the stuff that your panelists was saying that you have to worry about with your contract, your writer, and all that. Like that is so not a problem when you work on a cruise ship as a comedian. And keep in mind, as a comedian on a cruise ship, you're not considered crew. You are a guest entertainer, which means we have certain liberties and things that we can do that the crew people who work on the ships, like the room attendant, the bartender, you know, the electrician, all of them, where they have to do 6 months or 9 months straight based on their visas. As a guest entertainer, you know what I'm saying? Your contract, it could be a week long. It's based on your availability. You go in, do your dates, and you out. You know what I'm saying? Okay. So there's a real difference, you know, those different nuances that I just think was real important to put out there because some of the narrative that was stated last week, I'm like, you know, like that, yeah, no, that's a no-no. And then something else your guy said last week, Fabler said last week, he was saying that the cruise ship, in his opinion, that the cruise ship industry is where is good for like a up and coming comedian. And I'm here to tell you, I totally disagree because for the simple fact, an up and coming comedian, the cruise ship is not a place for you simply because, number one, you haven't worked long enough to gather that amount of material that's required. Okay. Now, you said that you talked with Carnival, the guy on Carnival, he told you need to have a minimum of 5 sets.
And that's that 30 minutes a set.
Yeah, 2 30-minute family-friendly shows, meaning clean, no cursing, no sexual innuendos. It has to be clean, family-friendly shows, and then 3 adult shows. And I'm here to tell you that's just with Carnival. And he might have been talking about the ship that he was on, because there are some ships in the Carnival fleet where we're required to have more shows than that. And, you know, like there's one XL ship, which is the big boy ship. The programming on that ship is totally different than your average cruise ship that is in the same fleet. And when we work on the XL ships, the big boy ships, we do 10 shows in 2 days. And you have to have a minimum of 6 different sets. And they might schedule 2 of them as a repeat. But even then, me and a couple of other committees out here, we do 10 new sets. You know what I'm saying? And then that's just with Carnival. Over on Norwegian, like I'm out on Norwegian tomorrow for Alaska, Norwegian shows are 45-minute shows. So you're going to do, 4 to 6 shows within that week. So you got to have not 30-minute sets of 5, but you need to have 5 45 minutes.
Yeah, and 45 minutes ain't no joke. Honestly, tell you the truth, if you ain't established.
Man, I was in a situation on Carnival where we did the transatlantic run. And when we left, the cruise director came to me and said, hey, I have some good news and I have some bad news. Which one do you want to hear first? I was like, well, give me the bad news. She said, unfortunately, the other 3 comedians that were scheduled to board, they wasn't able to get on board. Which I said, okay, what's the good news? She said, the good news is if you want their slots, we'll give them to you, which means extra pay.
Extra pay.
They supposed to catch up with us in Bermuda. We were pulling out of Tampa. They're supposed to catch up with us in Bermuda because they couldn't get on in Tampa for some strange reason. And by the time we got to Bermuda, it was like a Wednesday. I think we was pulling out like Sunday. So I believe Wednesday we reached Bermuda. Well, by that time, I had done 8 shows that week from Sunday to Tuesday night. I had done 8 shows. Now, keep in mind, if I'm out here on this water with only 5 30-minute shows, you're gonna come up short. So that's why I tell comics all the time, man. Don't worry about this cruise ship. Get your material up. Get your material up, because we see a lot. You think Atlanta is a place where a lot of comics go and bomb? You know, Uptown Comedy Club, like they used to say back in the day. These cruise ships, you have people get out there and they have a false narrative of what it takes to be out there. And I'm talking about veteran comedians that I've worked with who have pulled me to the side, say, yeah, man, I didn't know that I needed this much material out here. Because like I say, I'm over here, we're doing 45-minute shows. You know what I mean? So you can't say, oh, yeah, I got an hour, because the situation will come up and you get scheduled for more than your little hour. And then what you gonna do? Like they said in the movie, you done dropped your pistol when you bust through the window. Now what you gonna do?
Okay. Well, the correlation to being on the ship versus being on going to the clubs. I know he also mentioned in reference to the time frames of when you have to go. When I look back at it, I was because I worked with Arnez J yesterday, and then the week prior to that, of course, I also worked with you all when DL Hughley was here. Yeah. And when I think about it, after a show, and when you brought it to my attention, I had to really think about it. When you go through a regular show just at the comedy club, on that, if he's like a major over the road comic, he has a show on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. You doing 2 shows, and those shows, they got to flip the room. You might end up having to do your set again within the next 30 minutes if they flip the room in 7 minutes. Yeah, that's, you know what I mean? So I'm
Yeah.
thinking, okay, and then you got to do your set, but the difference is that with the cruise line is that you have to have a different set. I do know that when you go to the comedy clubs, you can pretty much run similar sets while you're there because it's a whole different group of people.
Yeah.
Here, I know when we was on the Carnival Cruise Line, I went to every last one of the shows, so I understand why you have to have a different set. Is because the people on the cruise line want to hear something different. I'm going to see
Yeah.
you again. So you got to have something else. I don't want to hear the same thing that you've been saying. But then what you also brought to my attention as well is that I did not know that on cruise lines they schedule for repeat shows, which
Repeat
means
shows.
that
Yeah.
even though you have a 5-show set, out of the 5 shows, your adult show one of them might be a repeat show.
Might be a
where-
repeat.
So
Yeah,
that's a
because
good thing to know.
what's the young lady name that's on your panel last week?
Claudine.
Yeah, she was saying how she went to the shows on a cruise ship, and the comedian, said, she went to multiple shows and he was repeating some of the stuff he was doing. And just to that comedian's defense, I just want to, maybe highlight, it might have been it was a great possibility that one of those shows that she went to, the cruise ship scheduled for him to repeat his prior show. Because what happens is they schedule repeat shows because the room that you're in might be a club that seats only 300.
Right.
And in order to accommodate all the passengers on the ship, they'll schedule repeat shows. And then sometimes the passengers will come into a show and they didn't read the fine print, that was on the marquee, or read the fine print that was in the itinerary, and they just popped up in there, and it's like, he said the same thing, at the 7 o'clock show, not knowing that might have been a day where they scheduled for him to do the same set at 7 o'clock and do the same set at 9 o'clock. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's a possibility. But I also want to say, you do have some cats out there who, like I said earlier, they get out there and they don't have enough bullets in the chamber, you know what I'm saying, or in the clip, to handle the schedule that was tossed to them. And, you might hear the same show. Now, I will say this too. You have, we're talking about the repeat shows. My mind went blank. Oh man.
Well, that's okay. In reference to the repeat shows, how when you're given a repeat show, I know I was listening to one of the comedians. They say, okay, when they do a repeat show, they kind of name that particular show what they're going to call it. So even though you got like 8 shows on the cruise line, each show might have a different title as to what you want to call it. And then if it is a repeat show, when they see the title, they'll kind of automatically think, okay, well, this might be the same show that he was doing before.
Right. And again, that's not on all cruise lines, not to cut you off. That's I know that format you're talking about, Carnival does that.
Okay.
So when they tell you that you need to have 2 30-minute PG shows and 3 30-minute adult shows, each one of those shows will have a name or have a title.
Okay.
And when they market your show throughout the ship, they don't say, comedian A Train only. What they'll say is, whatever my show is, School Days, A Train Live the Experience, and they advertise that show, which means, and I want to put this out there for some comedians who love comedy and who think they can just finesse their way on stage. There are some cruise ships and some cruise directors, I am telling you firsthand information. This is not hearsay. This ain't like pie in the sky. This is an absolute truth I'm telling you. There are some cruise directors and entertainment directors who will sit in the back of your show. If you made an agreement saying at 9 o'clock, I'm going to do my show that's entitled School Days, where they're looking for the material for School Days, which means if you're on stage and you're doing crowd work, you would get pulled into a meeting after that show, the next morning, you're in a meeting and they're asking you, hey, I noticed you were asking the audience questions during that show. Is that part of your material? Because in their mind, we're paying you for your set.
Okay.
And that's why I tell some comedians, they're like, oh yeah, you know, I do a little crowd work, do this. And I'm telling you, it's like, hey man, some of these cruise lines, they don't even allow you to do crowd work. You got to have material. And granted, from the school of comedy that we come from, you know, crowd work is comedy. You know what I'm saying? Like, we know the difference between crowd work versus somebody eating the clock because you done ran out of jokes. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I had situations where was on a particular ship and this was the conversation. And the goal was they want to make sure that you're honoring your part of the contract when you said you have this amount of time for this particular show.
Okay. And a lot of times the cruise directors, I will have to say that sometimes doing crowd work kind of gets the crowd warmed up for your set. A lot of times if they kind of like sit back and kind of look at the art of comedy in itself. But that's good to know that if you're going to tell them you got 45 minutes and that's exactly what you're going to do, that you have to be prepared to be able to do the full 45-minute set. I know when we was there, we saw Carl Strong. And Carl Strong, when we first saw him, was outstanding. He's a funny guy. He got the music and the dancing and down and everything like that. But then the second time we saw him, he was running similar material beforehand. Now, granted, now that I know that they do repeat shows, chances are is that he was doing a repeat show. Right. But then the final day of the cruise that night before we went back to Orlando, they did a big show where both of them did 30 minutes in the big room. Okay. Right. And then that's where he kind of went off. I'm talking about I guess he let everybody have it then. It was a good night that night for comedy. But to each his own as far as golly, what was his name? The second comedian. I'll eventually remember it because I talked about
Manny.
Manny Acosta. Every time we saw him, even when when they had the scheduling conflict, all of his material was different material. And then it brings up the idea, okay, well, listen, for that particular situation, since there was a scheduling conflict and Carl couldn't make it and Manny had to do an extra show, chances are he got paid for that extra show now. It just didn't just, okay, we're just going to throw you up there. He was in the room and it was like, okay, well, listen, we need you to do this. Are you okay? And then he went on and then he went on stage and he explained. I mean, well, not explain the entertainment director, Thiago, that's what he called him. He explained that there was a conflict and everybody who was there to see Carl Strong, unfortunately, Manny Acosta is going to have to do it. And it was a good turnout. I thought it was exceptional. I was like, yo, he's running different stuff. You know, so as a comic, I told him as a comic, from a comic to a comic, I told him, I was like, you know, you did exceptional work. I appreciate the set and it being different. You know?
That's what's up. Yeah. And I'm a true stickler for that. And, you know, every cruise director that I've ever worked with, they'll tell you, I don't repeat shows. You know, I don't care if it's scheduled on the program. You know, Mom will give the crowd a good time, but I don't repeat shows because from my experience, when they do repeat a show, you can look at the capacity of the ship and it's like, man, there's no real need to repeat the show because you have the same people coming out to the shows. And because I know that, you know, I do a different set just so that the people won't feel like, you know, they like, oh man, we heard this one before. So I do, you know, within my week of contract, I don't never repeat a joke. And even when they add shows to my schedule, you know, it's going to be a new show.
Okay. All right. Well, given the circumstance, I definitely appreciate it. I didn't want to hold you too long, but with this, I'm glad we was able to clarify some things when it came down to doing cruise line comedy. But before we close, I know that there was a lot of negative connotation when it comes to doing cruise lines. A lot of people say if you do cruise lines, if you're on there for a certain period of time, you might lose like like contact with the real world as far as getting your material or whatnot. But then I started to think back at it. I was like, if you're on a cruise ship, do you know how much stuff you see on a cruise ship? You can do a 45-minute set just based off of the people getting on the boat. And that's just me and my comedic head. Like when we went with Chip and them, how my sister-in-law had to get pushed by the same guy that also pushed Chip. And I know the guy had to push Chip was cussing because Chip is big. And my sister-in-law, she's small, she's petite, she's like a little baby person. And the fact that he had to change up, I was like, I know that man was mad. I was like, at least I hope you tipped him. Because he had to push you all the way to the ship. I know I'd be mad. I was like, bro, we're gonna have to get you a motorized ship, motorized like thing. But before we go, I want you to go ahead and let the people know exactly what you got going on, your social media information, how they can reach out to you. Because I look at a lot of your posts and stuff like that, and I see how the people enjoy you on the cruise lines, especially the one where you was playing. Well, I don't want to throw it out there, but they was dancing, and one guy was really, he was really gyrating. You know what I'm saying? So y'all go ahead and follow his page. But what's your social media information so people can follow you, man?
Do you want me to address the thing about the narrative working on the ships too long?
Oh yeah. Before you go,
I when people say that, and I've heard that before, and I really think it's shallow thinking, because you can fall into the same detriment by working in whatever lane you're in too long.
Right.
Whether that's you doing clubs for years, whether you doing corporate gigs for years, if you can become a hack or get stale no matter what you do. So it's not just that, if you work these ships so long, you become, something, negative or kind of falling off. It's like, no, if you don't evolve as an artist, you will become a hack, and that has nothing to do with because you're working on a platform of a cruise ship. Like I know some boys out here who've been out here like 20 plus years and know the comedy streets on land, may not even know who they are, but out there they are king and they're killing it and been killing it for decades. You know what I mean? I think it's just a matter of the artists need to remain balanced in whatever you do. And I really think ultimately what it is shade, because cruise ship entertainers used to get a lot of flack anyway, until maybe like in the last 7 to 10 years, in my experience. Because what comedians are recognizing is the consistency in the level of work. And as a gigger or a comedian, the only thing we look for at the end of the day is guaranteed dates. It's only 52 weeks out of the year. And what I'm finding and discovering, what these other comedians are discovering now, is how much we on ships really work. And I'm gonna tell you right now, these ships have more dates than they have comedians. You know what I mean? So now you have those same comedians who are up in the public throwing shade on the comics. They're in our inbox asking us, hey man, how can I get on to do XYZ? You know what I'm saying? So I really think it's just a matter of, if you don't evolve as a comic in whatever lane you're in, you become stale, stagnant, and this, that, and the third. And that's why my manager, who is my wife, she keeps me booked on multiple avenues other than just cruise ships. I'm doing corporate gigs, I'm doing churches, I'm doing festivals, I'm hosting concerts, I'm working clubs. Like you just saw me the other week, I was at the club with DL, and I hit the club with Bill. So I'm always like keeping myself in different atmospheres and different platforms just so I can stay sharp. You know what I mean? But anyway, follow me on my Instagram is Comedian A Train. That's all one word. Comedian ATRAIN. And then my Facebook is Comedian A Train as well. That's Comedian A Train. That's A-train. Get at me, man. So get ready to go jump on Norwegian Sun in the morning for Alaska run. And we're out here, man.
All right. Well, before
I just commend everybody who's out here trying to take care of their family and provide for their family, man, and doing it by spreading love and laughter, across the world, man. So it's just that, if we out here, we got to have the right information. So I just wanted to kind of like give you a little bit more clarity on what it is out here and what it takes to be out here as a comedian. And if you're a new comedian, this is not the world for you, because they'll boot you off this ship in a minute if you don't have the material.
Okay. Well, before I do let you go, I know Fabler was actually in the chat, and I didn't want to skip over his comment without at least addressing it. He
Yeah, go
asked,
ahead.
"Are there any other industries that require us comics to be this structured?" I don't. Me personally, I don't think it's as structured this. I don't think it's structured like this any different on a cruise line than it is when you work in a regular club, from what I'm seeing now. When I work at the club now, and I just do the audio, sometimes I might get a guest spot, but I'm there just as long as the comics are. I'm there to cut the audio on, and I'm there from that Thursday, that first show, and then okay, well then Friday we got the 2 shows, which is 7 and then 9:30, or 7 and 9, and then you got Saturday, which is another 7 and 9, and then if they really pushing it and they want to add shows, they can put a double show on Sunday, which is another
Right.
7 and 9.
4 o'clock
Um,
show. Yeah.
4 o'clock show. But then when I looked at the cruise line, every time I went to go see each one, it was okay. Well, I didn't go to any of the PG shows. I only went to the adult shows, but then it was only that one particular adult show that particular day. So that particular comic worked at 30 minutes, and then the rest of his day he had, you know what I mean? And then I
Yeah.
saw Manny Acosta in the club right after his set. So
Yeah. The only
um,
time we work is when we're on stage. And to address this person's question about, is there any other, lane that requires, for us to be this structured? Here's what you have to understand. Here's what I say to that. It's called show business. And when you operate on the cruise ship, you're not some class clown. You're not this little person on the back of the school bus, just cutting up until you get to your bus stop. You got people who have paid top dollar to be on this cruise. And you, as the comedian, despite how you view yourself, you as that comedian on that ship, you are the featured act of entertainment. No different than, very similar to like when you go to Vegas and you have a residency at Vegas.
right.
And because this is the business side of things, then you as the comedian need to understand, oh, this ain't just some little class clown, or watch me go be funny, or some hood room where they smoking hookahs and got 13 TVs on, watching the game, watching the news, and you in the corner trying to tell jokes and ranking on somebody's wig. And like, it's not that. You are literally on a multi-billion-dollar industry vessel. And while you are booked as the guest entertainer, their brand is backing and endorsing that you supposed to be exactly who you said you were. So you can't go into it like, man, they look too stressful, man. Let me just land my joke. At some point, we got to grow up. Not saying this was your narrative, but I'm just saying at some point, as an artist, we have to grow up and understand that it's not just a show, but it's business as well. And from the business aspect, you have to keep in mind you're on maritime law. You're not on land, which means the laws that govern things on land, they don't apply to the same laws out on that water. So there's a tightrope that you have to walk as a comedian. There's certain things you can't do because, you on maritime law. We can't fraternize with the guests. We can speak to them, talk to them, hang out, whatever, but you can't be trying to holler at the ladies. You can't be out there getting sloppy drunk. Like, man, I did my show. Let me just have a good time. No, bro. Like, there's a business part of this. And I think a lot of times with comedians, they miss that and they overlook that aspect. And so when you view it from that understanding, you'll understand also that, oh, it's not a tightrope at all. It's actually business.
Okay. Well, A-Train, man, first and foremost, I want to say thank you for at least blessing us with your time. I know that you're busy, and I know in the podcast prior to this one, I was like, well, I wanted to reach out to certain individuals, but if I don't have the ability to be able to provide some type of assistance or help or something, to be able to, just so I'm not the one calling, but like, asking you for something or just asking and not providing
no,
any
man, we
kind
brothers,
of value. You know what I mean?
We're in the same city, in the same lane, man. We brothers, bro.
But you know how individuals can become like, I don't want to be that particular guy that's like just asking without at least providing some type of value. So I know this podcast is what I kind of created for other comics to be able to provide their information and their knowledge. This is what at least I do, and I provide my platform for anybody who's willing to come on and to have a conversation with me, to explain to me some things like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and post this. It's going to be posted up, and I'm going to go ahead and pull the audio and run it on the podcasting platforms as well, so that people can understand and actually listen to understand, okay, well, listen, as a comic, there is more than just doing birthday parties, family reunions, and funerals. You know what I mean? There's the corporate side of comedy that I was listening to Antoine talk about, where he does the room downtown in the office building.
Right.
But then there's the clubs that you can go to. The clubs. We have churches. I've done shows with Impact Church. I've done shows with Funny Bone, where you had to be clean. You have to have clean comedy, not clean, dirty comedy.
Right.
You know what I mean? So there's different aspects to the business. When I tell people I'm the 3 C's of comedy, that means I can do all 3 of them. So don't put me in a box. But then also the material for each area I've grown over the course of the last 7 to 8 years. So that's why I feel comfortable now. Like 3-4 years ago, people was talking about, Leroy, you should try to do the cruise line. I was like, no, I ain't got cruise line. I ain't got cruise line material. So you know what I mean? So, but first, I just want to thank you once again. For all of y'all that don't know, his Instagram is at A-Train. Is at A-Train. Is that correct?
No. My Instagram is Comedian A-Train. All one word. COMEDIANATRAIN. Comedian A-Train. Yeah. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, y'all heard what he said. Y'all go out there and y'all make sure that y'all follow him because he's a very funny brother of mine that's in my comedy family. And I appreciate the fact that he was able to give me some time today. So for all of those that watched and listened, just remember that we are Jacksonville's #1 live comedy podcast. We are Signal 27, and we will see you all next week. All right? Yeah, have a good night.